Hi, today we're going to make a lunch bag. It has snaps on it and then it opens up so you can reuse it. I'm going to start with your fabric, your canvas fabric. You should have already serged the edges. If you didn't serge the edges, you'll need to zigzag them. With your canvas folded in half, you want the folded edge on the bottom. Use your template and line up your left side, your right side, and the folded edge. You will place the label right inside that opening. Now that your label is sewn, or your label is glued onto your fabric, you're ready to sew the sides of your bag. So you're going to fold your fabric so the label is on the inside. You're folding it so that the right sides are together. You can pin or clip, so you can use clips or pins, whichever you prefer, to make sure that your edges are going to be straight and even. Again, clip the two edges, the raw edges all together, and your folded edge. Now, when you're sewing something like this, you want to always go the same direction. So I'm going to start at the top and sew down to the fold, and then on the other side, start at the top and sew down to the fold. And you're going to take off that clip and sew 1/4 of an inch. Back stitch. And again, you're going to start at the top and sewing down to the fold. Back stitch. So your two sides, now you have a pocket, like a bag. For your lining piece, you're going to fold them right sides together, so you have a fold right here. On one of the side seams, you are marking 3 inches and then 7 inches. This will be your opening so that you can turn your bag when you get it done. So you're going to clip that. Now, as you sew this, you're going to stop at that mark. So I'm coming to the mark. I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to lift up my needle. I'm going to put my foot over to the other mark. And sew. You're just going to sew the whole thing on this other side, the whole seam. Now, where this opening is, it's very helpful if you press that seam allowance open. So I'm just pressing it. This just is helpful when you go to put it together after you turn your bag. It just helps it come together a little easier if you do this. So just at that opening, I'm pressing my seam allowances back. Now we're going to sew the box pleats. So I'm going to first show you on the lining side. You want to make a good fold at the bottom of your bag. So that's a really nice crisp fold on both pieces. So we're going to start with the lining side. You're going to put your hand inside the bag and you're going to line up this seam to that fold. And you kind of have to peek in there to find the fold. Can you get a picture of that? It's harder. So see, this is my fold line and this is my seam. See how they're lined up? So if they're lined up that way, then it should be even. There's a template that you have to make sure that it's straight. So you're going to lay your template on that corner and you want that seam line to be straight. Notice how mine's not quite straight. So I need to pull my bag just a little bit this way. So see how now my corner is straight, my template is on there, and the seam is nice and straight. Using 2 of your clips, pin that template right onto your bag. Coming over to your sewing machine, you're going to sew that making sure that you're sewing just off of that template. Don't sew over the template or it, it will be sewn into your bag and we don't want that. So you're just sewing right along the edge of that template. So then you take the template off and you have a straight line there. Again, you're going to open up that corner and you're going to line up that folded edge. Sometimes you can feel it with your fingers. You're going to poke that corner right out and you're lining up that fold to the seam. See how my fold and my seam are lined up? Open it up and make sure it's all nice and flat. Put your template on right in the corner. And I'm not quite on there, so I need to push it over a little bit. Line it up again. Just a hair off. And now it's on. Now I want you to line them up and make sure that they're even, so that the lines are even. Okay, now you're going to do the same thing with the canvas part. This time I'm going to use that same blind hem foot right up against that edge of that template. It might be a little easier to help you get that straight. Now again, you're going to check that and make sure that they're straight. They're the same size. Now with your iron from the inside, you're going to make this, press that seam so that it's a nice pressed seam. So I'm just going in here and pressing that seam the direction. So I'm pressing it because it's already sewn down in this direction, so I'm pressing it so that it's nice and pressed. You just have to put your iron inside there and press that. And then do the same with the other side. Kind of pressing blindly. So see, now the seam is nice and pressed. We'll do the same thing with the lining. It's going that way, so you want to make sure that seam is all going the same direction. With the lining, you can kind of press it down with your fingers. The canvas is a little too heavy to do that. Iron out any wrinkles that you ironed in. Now you're going to trim the corners 1/4 of an inch. So you're just going to cut off 1/4 of an inch. Now you're going to zigzag those corners. A 3.5 width and a 1.5 length. You're zigzagging just along the edge. That's going to help that so it's not fraying. Now when you're doing more than one, you can just do them without taking it all off of your machine. It's a lot faster that way. I'm going to grab this one and do the other side. And then the last one. So now they're all nice and zigzagged. You've got a nice clean look there. Turn your lining right side out. Leave your canvas wrong side out. Poke out these corners, and you're just going to match up so you've got right sides together, and your seam, you should have this seam going one way and on the canvas, and the lining will be going the opposite way. Put a clip there. Come over on the other side and do a clip there. Making sure that those seams are even right together. And then put one clip in the middle. And then one clip in the middle over here. Put your machine on a straight stick. Okay, we're ready to sew the top edges together now. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch. Now you're going to poke your hand through the opening in the lining piece. See, here's my opening. I'm going to poke my hand in there, and I'm going to pull out the main fabric so that it's all stick your hand in there and poke out these corners. Just poke those out really well with your finger or a point turner. This is where the opening is, and because you already pressed that seam, it's going to be a lot easier to pull that together and close that off. It's like I got some white threads poking through there that I want to get out of there. Pin at the start and the end of your opening so you know when to stop stitching. And I like to change my thread now to red. I'm going to edge stitch those two that open seam together. So I'm just going right along the edge of that fabric. Going to push the bag now inside, the lining inside the bag, and you're going to poke out those corners so that the corners of your lining match up with the corners of your outside bag. Here you're going to pull the lining down and just make sure that it is nice and flat, because you don't want that lining poking out from the outside of the bag. So you're just going to roll it with your fingers. Lining. Okay, now poke in your corners so that your corners are lined up nice and straight. Just now you're going to iron this. I'm just ironing just one layer. I'm just ironing it so that the top, the red, is not poking on the outside. I'm going to roll that around and iron that nice and straight and crisp. The corners should be nice and even. Change back to your white thread. Now that you've got white thread on, you're ready to edge stitch. You're going to stitch this along the edge. You can come in a little bit further than what we've done before, and put your stitch length on 3. I'm following my fold right along the inside toe of my foot to make sure that that's a straight stitch. As I come around, I like to clip my threads. Now you're going to need your seam gauge. You're going to press the pleats now. So on one side, just start on one side and make sure your bag is all laying nice and flat. And you're going to fold this kind of right at the corner of that pleat, and it should be 1 7/8. So up here you're going to measure 1 7/8 as well. So 1 7/8 there. And 1 7/8 there. So the whole thing is 1 7/8, 1 inch, 1 7/8 inches. And just press that right down. And then come on to the other side and do the same thing, 1 7/8. So those should be even. Turn it over. Make sure your lining is tucked in. There you you're going to do the other side. 1 7/8. That one's give that a good pressing. Turn it over on the other side. See how you're making it look like a sack? And 7/8. Check to make sure they're even, which they are. Now that your bag is all pressed, you're ready to edge stitch these 4 fold lines that you just pressed. You're going to always sew from the top of the bag down to the bottom. You want to sew about 1/8 of an inch edge stitch. Back stitch. You're going to stop right at that seam where the box pleat is. And back stitch. And then you're going to do the next one. Now this time you can't see the seam, so you're going to have to just feel it. And you're going to stop just right at that seam. It's thicker there, so you'll be able to tell. Always start at the top and sew down. Stopping at that seam and back stitching. The last one. Always make sure your top is even before you stitch it. Feel where that is, and you're going to stop right where that seam is. So now this is what your bag looks like. Now we're ready to put the snaps on, and we'll do those together at the center.